Tonight, the New York Post endorses revolution in Iran. Will it succeed? I clicked it twice. What? User error? Not mine. What did I do? Go.
All humans break. The difference between humans and gods is that gods can break humans.
Negotiate now. End this war.
You're watching Provoked with Darryl Cooper and Scott Horton, debunking the propaganda lies of the past, present, and future. This is Provoked.
All right, you guys. I don't know what the hell happened there with the thing, but hopefully it just made it funnier. Welcome to the show. It's Friday again. I'm Scott Horton, and he is the great Daryl Cooper, martyr made, American historian extraordinaire. And tonight we're going to talk about whether America is going back to war against Iran. There are protests in the street, and all the monarchists and Zionists are on Twitter endorsing the revolution and praying, for the freedom of the Iranian people. But there have been some massive protests, and I saw a report earlier on BBC propaganda about they've been really suffering a lot of price inflation, and then of course is the fresh water crisis, and so there is plenty of cause to protest. Every time this happens in Iran, though, protests of any kind, mostly, Israeli leaders and other Western leaders following the Israelis, tend to jump right on it and say, see, it's the fall of the regime. And Ayatollah is sure to be overthrown any moment now. And, hey, it could happen. But I've seen big protests in America, too, none of which portended the fall of the Justice Department and its authority over the land or anything like that, ultimately. But anyway, Donald Trump, here, let me share this this thing from the Truth Social. I went ahead and joined Truth Social, Darryl. Why are my StreamYard buttons not wanting to click on time for me tonight? What is this? Do I need to hit refresh or something?
I see it.
All right, here we go. If Iran shots and violently kills protesters, the U.S. is coming. Daryl Cooper, what do you think he really meant by that?
Does that mean like if they just put a pillow over their face, so it's not a violent killing, is that okay? Maybe they could get away with that. Nah, who knows, man? I mean, like, this stuff with Iran is like, it's just depressing at this point. It's hard to watch. Like when I watch like BB come for the New Year's party and he's standing there and just dog walking Trump on camera again. For a while it was infuriating. At this point, it's just kind of sad and kind of demoralizing. And I'll get moralized again soon enough. But man, right now it's just, are we going to war with Iran? Yeah, probably. Well, here's the best part. Here's the part that like nobody really wants to hear. We'll probably eventually topple the regime and reduce the place to like just total chaos and civil war and massacre like we did in Syria and Libya and everywhere else. We'll probably do it. It's just very depressing to like, as a person who's like naturally patriotic, has always been, a veteran myself, somebody whose family members served in the military going back and back, to just see what we've become, just this agent of chaos around the world that goes around, not even in the service of what our ruling class, maybe falsely thinks are our own interests, but just a mercenary that goes around destroying countries, meddling in affairs, and just really like making every place that we put our finger in worse than it was before.
Yeah. We talked about this too, about how over the time it gets easier and easier for presidents to do this. People just kind of quit caring. Obama announced the Libya war from a press conference down in Brazil. For the next big one in Yemen, they just put out a State Department press release. Bernadette Meehan. That's the war power. Resides in State Department spokeswoman Bernadette Meehan declares war on Yemen. Killed 300,000 people, bombed them for 7 years. I mean, sort of kind of by proxy, but really everybody knows USA was in charge the whole time. So that's how it works. And so, I got a couple of people criticize me because I called Trump Obama, because this is basically the same excuse he invoked to bomb Libya, that, oh no, Gaddafi is killing protesters, even though these were Al-Qaeda guys chopping people's heads off and trying to overthrow the country. And he had not massacred civilians in the country, in the cities and towns where his forces had already taken land back. So they were just lying that he intended to kill all these people in Benghazi, 750,000 people. Imagine the city of Charlotte, North Carolina being wiped off the map, Darryl. I mean, it's a stupid lie, but at least it's a big lie, or at least it's something. Here, Trump is saying he'll intervene if anybody is killed protesting in Tehran. I mean, and then so I says that and people go, no, Obama liked Iran. And it's like, yeah, it don't matter which country we're bombing that we're talking about, man. What matters is how easy it is. And, I don't know if they're bots or not, but I presume some of them are real people saying, hey, it's about time we dealt with the Iranians. I'm tired of them and their problem. And they just rationalize, just like it's W. Bush, that like, man, Trump wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't the right thing to do. So what are you even worried about at all? That's really begging the question.
The really
there.
Depressing part. I mean, that is the really depressing part. And what's really depressing about it is it would be more understandable if the younger generation was just, yeah, I don't like the Iranians anyway, just going along with whatever Trump said, because they weren't around in 2003. They don't remember. They're not old enough, if it was the younger crowd. But it's the opposite. It's all the people who are old enough to remember what happened back then and what has happened like in all the years since, who were the ones cheering it on. The younger people are largely against it. And, it's, one of the things that the people in charge, they know this and they don't care. But I think a lot of people who just kind of casually throw out, just nonsense tweets about liberating Iran, blah, 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 is that like, if everything goes according to plan, we get, a replacement government in there. I don't think most people, really understand that, like, best case scenario for even like, let's say you avoid a full scale, just Syrian civil war in Iran and total destruction like that. Let's say a new regime does take place. You're looking at decades of brutal police state repression in that country, as one that is fully endorsed and fully backed and probably funded by the United States and Israel and stuff. Because, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people in that country who are not happy about the change. And, or even if there aren't that many of those people, which I think there would be, there's going to be a suspicion, like there is after every revolution or every regime change, that there are, like, elements of the old regime that are a threat. And so you're looking at, like, best case scenario, just decades of brutal repression that's just going to create more resentment, build up more resentment and set the stage for some future unpredictable backlash that is going to get blamed on something that is totally different than the thing that actually caused it.
Yep. Hey man, I'll never forget Congressman Bob Dornan. I don't know why I got such a grudge against this SOB, but back in 2000 and let's say 12, he was interviewed on CNN about, okay, maybe this would have been after the first big fake sarin hoax of August 13, when they were really debating whether to go in there with a full-scale invasion and overthrow Assad. And Bob Dornan is asked on CNN or one of these, okay, but like, if we do overthrow Assad, these are adults talking. If we do overthrow Assad and his government, congressman, well, what do we expect to happen after that? And Bob Dornan says, well, we'll just have to hope that someone comes to the fore. That's all. I debated one of these Israeli propagandists on the Pierce Morgan show, whatever, a few months back. Or I guess back in last June would have been, I guess. And they played a clip of Nancy Mace, and then it was one of the propagandists on the show with us too. And they're just saying, well, this was the quote. It may have been that girl Emily Austin that took the $7,000 proposed. Said, well, the Iranian people, after we regime change the country, the Iranian people will just have to rise up and create a great new thing. Like, yeah, you're just bluffing. You know nothing about it, but this could lead to, as you were saying, a massive civil war, a Syrian style chaos. That we had, it took, Darryl, it took 14 years for Al-Qaeda to win that war and take over Damascus. And more than 500,000 people were killed in the meantime. It was an absolute catastrophe visit on Syria by America and its allies for Israel.
And the reality of the situation is that the people making these decisions don't care. Like, that's a fine outcome as far as they're concerned. Just having it be in total chaos, just they're fine with that. That is maybe, I'm sure they'd prefer if the Sunni and Shia Alawites in Syria all came together and joined hands and bowed down to the American and Israeli flag and told us how much they love us and how grateful they are for everything. I'm sure they prefer that. But as they're like actually going through and like wargaming these situations, I'm sure that they realize that total chaos and destruction is the most likely outcome. And they're like, that's fine. That's a decent second option,
Yeah. Or, yeah, they just don't really care about what happens next. They just, like, in the idiot sense, they don't even consider what happens next. And they just sort of, well, we'll deal with that when we get to it. I'm reminded of David Wormser, who I'm so fond of picking on, Mr. Clean Break himself, was complaining. If you look at his Twitter feed this week, you'll see him complaining about this Syrian regime. Jolani, he still calls him Jolani, the bin Ladenite, right? Not al-Shara. And he's saying, look at this guy and his HTS terrorist regime going around killing innocent people and persecuting Christians. It's like, yeah, but you're the guy that said we will have to engage the fundamentalists with better allies than the Baathists. And you're the guy who refused to take that back after 35 years of chaos over there. No, it has to be the warring tribes, the religiously motivated sectarian groups. We have to reduce it to that first. Then we'll figure out how to deal with that. As he says in Coping, we have to expedite the chaotic collapse to Syria so that then we can control the better outcome. And this is the better outcome. A bin Ladenite regime. Literally the Islamic State, only Islamic State West instead of Islamic State East.
Yeah, it's like they have.
And then he says, "Oh, I'm horrified. You know what? Maybe we should consider intervening in Syria."
It's like they have just no concept of the reality of people actually living in these places. It's like, or I don't know, maybe just people, when you get like most of the people who get to that level of power are just kind of sociopaths, and the ones who aren't, like Thomas Massey, eventually get run out in one way or another, isolated and pushed to the side. I don't know. But it's like it really seems like they just have no concern whatsoever for the fact that there's people that got to live through this stuff,
Yeah. How do you like this one, man? Long-time fan. Oh, whoops, I have here. He just heard that they evacuated the embassy in Baghdad. Or I wonder if that's Erbil or Baghdad. Interesting times, man. Uh-oh, how do I make that go very good? Oh, I better figure out where that comment went so I can disappear it. Oh, there it is. I just needed to page up a little bit. That's what I get for trying to forward out this thing while I'm live. Here's the thing that's important. Benjamin Netanyahu came to town and he says to Donald Trump, he says, forget the nuclear program. Forget the nuclear program. The problem is missiles. Iran can't have missiles. And nobody says that they're making 3-stage ICBMs to threaten the United States. I don't believe. I mean, they did put a couple satellites in space. That's not exactly the same technology for delivering missile, weapons payloads, but it's close. So there is, that potential there. But I think what we're talking about is mid-range missiles that can hit Tel Aviv, and the Iranians have claimed to be producing them over time for next time as a deterrent. And then, so putting aside the, quite severely curtailed, or not curtailed, but, eroded, whatever, destroyed nuclear program and its status now, Trump's now decided the next excuse for war, well, one could be the missiles, and now he's even saying it could just be the protesters. So, again, I don't know.
I mean, in the missiles,
we're stuck in this dilemma of not wanting to predict war, but
well, I mean, the missiles one is particularly ridiculous just because, I mean, leaving aside whether they're developing long-range missiles that could hit the U.S., like, who cares? But it's just, I mean, what that really is saying is, that policy is telling Iran that Israel is going to attack you and you are not allowed to fight back. That's all it's saying. If you tell them they're not allowed to make ballistic missiles, that's the only way they got Israel to call it off earlier this year or last year, because they were able to hit back, and this is just telling them that Iran's never fired a missile at Israel or anybody else offensively, out of nowhere. Certainly not a sneak attack while they were in the middle of negotiations with that party or something. It's always gone one way, and everybody knows that, a policy saying that they can't build ballistic missiles is simply just telling them you're not allowed to defend yourself, and if you try, then the Americans might step in. And you've seen this before. I mean, I think you've seen versions of this like throughout history where you saw this in World War II with the Japanese, where you just FDR backed them into a corner where they were really facing a choice between a chaotic retreat from their positions in China from a war they've been fighting for many years because they couldn't fuel their armies, or they had to go find an alternate source of fuel, which happened to be owned by the British and the Dutch and so forth. And so we backed them into a corner until they attacked us. And the unfortunate thing is, like, just like with Russia, if they're ever successful in getting Putin to like start striking staging areas in Poland or something, I mean, people like you and me, dude, like we're going to be just like the America First movement was in December 8th, 1941. I mean, it's just, nobody's going to remember any of the stuff that we did to help push that situation and get it there. Everybody's going to go crazy and nobody's going to want to hear it. And, it's just, it's just very upsetting. Sorry, I'm black pilled today, man.
Well, yeah, it's some ugly things. So, it's funny about, security is a government program, right? So like the thing that I learned that I was most wrong about and most surprised about last June was the ease with which they took out all the anti-aircraft that Mossad and whatever Israeli military intelligence assets and whoever had infiltrated the country well enough and had sabotage missions enough, or at least had identified every SM-3 site that they needed and just obliterated the anti-aircraft on the way in there and just ruled the airspace virtually uncontested the whole time. Which I thought it would have been a lot harder than that. And so, and who knows? I mean, Iran is a big country, and again, security is a government program, so you could see them just being lax for, all kinds of close enough for government work type, bureaucratic reasons. So then to this tweet by Mike Pompeo, the former director of the CIA and Secretary of State, the Iranian regime is in trouble, claims they're bringing in mercenaries to crush the protests. And then some nonsense about numerology here. And then he says, Happy New Year to every Iranian in the streets, also to every Mossad agent walking beside them. So the thing is there, you could say, oh, he admits it or whatever, but you could also look at it like, oh, it's kind of a psyop. He's kind of picking on them and trying to make them paranoid that like, ooh, it's the Israelis, are manipulating everything. They're behind everything or whatever. Then again, the Israelis do have unlimited money from the American people, and they have the help of the CIA and the MI6 and whatever. And again, Iran's a big country. And so, and again, they have been able to infiltrate their guys into there to a great degree. To whatever degree, I don't know. So, and I just don't know. I really should have checked Max Blumenthal's Twitter before we went on tonight, man. He and Kit Clarenberg and those guys will be first on it if there's real evidence that USAID and NED, IRI and NDI and the rest of the gang, Soros groups and the rest were involved in this thing. There's plenty of evidence that they were involved in 2009. In fact, Kenneth Timmerman, a real hawk who is from the National Endowment for Democracy, boasted about that in an interview with Newsmax in 2009 during the Green Revolution. That you're damn right that the NED was supporting those protesting, which all they were doing was supporting Mousavi to be the president when he was the Ayatollah's man anyway. They all are. You know what I mean? It wasn't going to be much of a green revolution either way. He was going to be one click to the more American, maybe, but pretty small click. But failed anyway. But so, I mean, there's every reason to be suspicious here about intervention. And the people of Iran can have all kinds of legitimate grievances. I figure as much as I hate politicians, if they were trying to dictate my religion to me, or if it was my religious leader trying to dictate my politics to me, I think I'd like them even less. And so, I stand with all people in the world who want to secede from their regime's authority, but I stand against the U.S. government or any of its allies intervening in any way or putting their thumb on the scale in any way in these people's countries, man. They could very well be replaced by somebody worse. And
there are no libertarians in countries like this for a reason, and it's that it's easy for us to say those things. But over there, I mean, they have the world empire breathing down their neck, like literally trying to destroy their country, and they've got examples of how that goes, like recent examples of how that goes. And so, the idea that like you're going to have a government that's look at how thoroughly Israel had infiltrated Iran before that sneak attack earlier last year. I mean, when you got stuff like that going on, I mean, you almost have to be a police state or just hang up your boots and like just let somebody else do it. I mean, because like there's no way to resist it if you're going to do that. Like the idea that you can just have sort of a free and open government for your politicians to get bribed and do what, like, it's just you have to have a certain amount of authoritarianism, just like we recognize this always in the United States and every Western country. For all the talk about freedom of speech, when we get into like a real war, we don't have freedom of speech. They'll throw you in jail for saying we shouldn't be at war,
And look at everywhere that they operate over there. I mean, take Russia, for example. When they say freedom of speech in Russia, they are talking about anti-Putinist, pro-American sock puppet parties that they would like to install in power, that they will bankroll with millions of dollars. You have the phony, I don't know if you remember the Snow Revolution. They all wore white ribbons in 2011. Michael McFaul and Hillary Clinton trying to push this thing, an alliance between right-wing nationalists to the right of Putin and Moscow liberals, New York Times reading Moscow liberals, as a coalition to try to oppose Putin. So like you're saying, you loosen up your political system at all, America's coming, man. We're going to squeeze right in there. And for all of their talk, it's so funny to listen to them. And I remember this from when I was, in high school and whatever, like in the Clinton years, the way they talked about spreading democracy and teaching democracy and all this stuff. Is like, has there ever been an election where the NED and George Soros organizations helped them hold it, but they didn't give a damn who won? And in fact, they'd have been perfectly happy to have the pro-Russian guy win as long as you're obeying and working the process. See, democracy, that's what we really care about. Like, give me a break, dude. No one would believe that for a moment. Look at where they intervene and how they intervene in, say, Belarus in 2001, 2005, and 2020. That's all because they think that Lukashenko, why, he's he's mean and bad. And those people, we care so much about the Belarusian people that we just want them to have new, better leadership. And you know what? If that new, better leadership is even closer to the Kremlin than this guy, well, that would be okay if that's what the people of Belarus want. Yeah, no, that's not how those played out ever. 3 major attempts to overthrow Belarus in the last 25 years.
Yeah, and that's something worth thinking about. You know, on the heels of Syria falling, you know, if they're successful in taking down the Iranian regime, I think you're going to see what vassals and dependent states and allies that Russia has start to get really, really skittish. You know, I mean, I think that that Russian prestige among their own allies would take a pretty huge hit if Iran goes down. I mean, it's a, it almost seems like when you go back to the earlier examples, you go back to like 2001 in Belarus, most people didn't even know that was going on. Like unless you were like politically engaged, you had no idea what was even going on. Today, nobody believes that any of this is for democracy or blah, blah, blah. Nobody believes that. The internet has made it so that everybody knows. Nobody has any illusions. All of that is gone. And so what that's done, rather than the people in charge sort of like taking that into account and adjusting course a little bit, instead, they're just like, all right, fine, mask off. And it's just hard power all the way. We're not even asking, we're telling. We're not asking the American people if they want to be involved. We're not trying to goad them into it with ideas of mushroom clouds over Chicago and Iraq WMD. No, we don't care anymore. We're not even going to try to sell you on it, And I guess that's what you got to do if you're going to keep doing it. I mean, it's very disappointing, because the thing is, like, populist movements like the Trump movement got all these people, like a lot of the Groyper types, a lot of the younger guys who just think like, well, okay, like we can, they don't like JD Vance and they have their reasons, and that's fine. And they think like, okay, well, we're going to, if he doesn't do what we want, we're going to go against Vance in 2028. And if he loses and we get 8 years of a Democrat, that's fine. Like, we'll regroup and blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, these things come around like once every 60, 70, 80 years, if you're lucky. And, to have a movement like this come to nothing, which is really where this is headed. It looks like this whole MAGA thing is really looking like a bad joke. It's
Zionism, man. It's destroyed everything.
Yeah,
Israel, it's America first or Israel instead. And Trump has made his choice here.
He's definitely made his choice. And the thing that's so sad about it is he could have been like a super, super, super strong ally of Israel, make George W. Bush look like, the Ayatollah, and still not just allow Benjamin Netanyahu to put a leash around his neck and march him around on TV every few days just to rub it in our face, And but it's I don't know, man. Like I heard from somebody who knows a lot more people than I know, and a lot of more important people than I know, and knows them well. He's 100% convinced, and not based on, according to him, on speculation, but based on firsthand knowledge, that Trump feels like he's under an assassination threat from the Israelis if he doesn't do what they want. I don't know what to make of that. On one hand, it feels like it's just kind of cope, like just don't want to accept the fact that this is just who this guy is,
Yeah.
But that's how he's acting. I mean, it really is.
He's got a big shit-eating grin on his face during all of this stuff.
Yeah,
he doesn't have a gun to his head.
Those aren't hostage videos. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, but that is how he's. That's I don't know how he would behave differently other than the shit-eating grin. If that was the case, and just the way that, he could have been like, Israel, do whatever you want. But, we're focused over here on all the MAGA stuff, trade and domestic policy and blah, 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 blah. But no, I mean, he went from like running on the biggest mistake we ever made was getting into the Middle East and getting into these conflicts into the Middle East. And, we focus too much on this area of the world. We should be focusing on China and blah, 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 all this stuff. And that's just all gone. I mean, it's just like everything else is an afterthought. Immigration's an afterthought. Everything else is an afterthought. And he's losing his younger base. Anybody that's engaged like online who's like young enough. What?
Was it you that was saying that he really needs to get back on Twitter? That he is like really missing the second half of him being on Twitter before was the feedback. And he's just not getting that on Truth Social in the way that he used to.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I posed that question, I think on Twitter earlier myself or maybe I was just responding to something that somebody said. Like, I think honestly, like Trump probably has no idea that a huge chunk of his base feels betrayed by all this.
Yeah, I mean, they all get stuck in a bubble at that level of power. He would have to have news. Remember, people are like, maybe Barron, his son, will tell him something. You know what I mean? Like, his son told him to go on the Theo Von show. So maybe his son will tell him, hey, Dad, you know, there's a segment out there that don't like there. You know what I mean? But because we're all sort of desperate to figure out, like, by what avenue could you get this information to him that these views exist out here?
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, I know people, we know people who do talk to Trump personally, who are really like in that, facing the dilemma that David Hackworth faced during Vietnam. You know, the question of like, I see what's going on here is crazy and it's messed up. Do I go out in public and start speaking about this and burn all my bridges and all of my ability to have any influence over what's going on and to try to mitigate some of this? Or do I keep my mouth shut and be a good soldier so that, you know, even if on the margins, I can kind of try to steer this thing in the right direction? And there are a lot of people who are in that position right now and have told me so, by the way.
Yeah.
And, you know, and somebody asked earlier in the chat, you know, if Trump keeps us out of war in Iran and Venezuela, then, you know, would you consider his his administration like a net success or whatever? No, because these situations didn't exist before. Like we weren't going to war with Iran and Venezuela under Biden, and Trump somehow like saved us from it. Like this all came out of nowhere, you know. So no.
All right, so hold that thought for a second. Let's do a little bit of business here. First of all, get yourself some gourmet coffee here from Mundo's Artisan Coffees. You know, Phil Pepin is my caffeine dealer over there at Mundo's. Get it? They hate Starbucks, so it's Mundo's. And he sends me all the reviews. He forwards me the emails when people leave great reviews for the coffee. It's really good coffee. And I know there's a million kinds of coffee out there, but this is the best stuff. So you should get some. And you know what I was thinking would be cool is I wonder if any restaurant owners out there would like to start selling Scott Horton Show brand coffee, man, something like that. That would be cool. You think about the gallons of coffee drunk in this country every day. If we could figure out how to market this stuff real good, just take a picture of that QR code there. And also, I hit the wrong button, but I gotta, what do I do? Well, that wasn't the right one. Oh, this is the one I hit here. And now I can minimize that, and then I'll be able to hit on Matt Cercely here. He is a heroic tax attorney, tax planning attorney for small businesses and high-income professionals. I know we would all like for an asteroid to land on IRS headquarters, but the deal is you do have to pay your taxes, but what you want to do is avoid as many of them as you can. And this guy, Matt Cercely, is a real expert. He will help you set up whatever, you know, if you need S-Corp taxation rules or however, you know, is best to fit your needs to make sure that you pay every penny that you have to pay and not one penny more, not one nickel more. Pennies don't exist anymore. They inflated them out of existence, but not one nickel more than they are, due under the law, not under what's right to take from you. So Matt Cercely, he's as anti-government as you are, and he will help save you from the tax man. And he supports good anti-government podcasts like this one. And also, you know what? He supports the Tom Woods Show, which advertises for Matt Cercely too. And the Tom Woods Show is where Darryl had a really great episode, the first episode of the year over there, about the war on the right over Israel and interventionism. fantastic interview there. Tom Woods episode, whatever it is. So everybody check out tomwoods.com there and here on the YouTubes and all that for that great interview. And then, I want to switch to a little bit of the domestic side, Darryl, of the Hasbara war here. I don't know if you saw this, but I just laughed my ass off literally out loud when, did you see that CBS has a new America First ad campaign? We're American patriots, dude, and we're proud. Like, I don't know why they're not like sitting on the hood of a Ford truck in the ad or whatever. Like, got an eagle and a bud. Like, oh, we're Americans. Like, dude, we all know what you're compensating for over there, CBS News. All of a sudden, the most patriotic, bald eagle, Benjamin Franklin, Americanist news channel. Yeah, right, dude. As Bill Hicks might say, we can see right through you. So I got a kick out of that. Just seeing the desperation of the Hasburists here. Another one, I interviewed Jason Jones today from the Vulnerable People Project. He's a Catholic conservative, save the children type. And he was talking about just this whole propaganda narrative that Netanyahu is debuting now, that Israel stands with the Christians of the Middle East. And Jason Jones is like, man, don't make me die laughing over this. When you look at who is killing Christians in the Middle East, it's Israel and their Turkish and Indian allies. And of course, their jihadi allies in Syria. And previously, the civil war and the chaos, the Shiite and Sunni militias that persecuted and destroyed the Christian communities in Iraq War II. And so, which of course was at Israeli behest. And we talked about the confusion where most Americans just assume that the Israeli Jews are on the Christian side because they're our greatest ally and all of that stuff, right? So it's sort of, then they're surprised to learn that, a fifth or so of the Palestinian Arabs are actually Christians, and it's the Israeli Jews who are bombing them and their Muslim neighbors alike, their churches and mosques together in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank and all of that stuff. So, but again, it goes to show the desperation of I think it's got to be falling really flat, right? You're going to have some Protestant churches where they're like, wow, yeah, Netanyahu says he loves us Christians. But everybody else, well, more and more, I think, are just seeing through the desperation in that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they know that that's the case. I wonder really, though, how much they care, how much they really think it's an issue, that public opinion's turning against them. As long as they maintain control of the levers of, the levers of state in the US and the other countries they care about. Like, I don't know. I think that they are very comfortable with, there's a lot of people in the US, or like, sort of dissident politics on either side who talk about the possibility of revolution or civil war or just the people not taking it anymore. And there's no evidence that people in the US are remotely willing. I mean, we told people you're not allowed to go to church or we'll arrest you and throw you in jail. And in places like California, it was the case for like a year and a half. People didn't do anything, and so I think that they just feel like, the people will get really mad. And what they'll do about it is they'll go online and complain. And they'll see that more and more people are starting to agree with them in their complaining online. And they'll think they'll think that some kind of progress is being made. And then now, but meanwhile, the next domino falls. And, if there's publicity fallout, we'll deal with that later. I mean, they don't seem particularly concerned about it,
Yeah. Well, of course, it's divided, right? The lobby is multifaceted, and there are people who are, take different, approaches to the thing. I wonder what you think about not the Somali fraud, but the PR about the Somali fraud. Now, I think it's pretty organic in that the thing is just completely outrageous, and then Elon Musk retweeted it, and then that's a pretty big deal. You know what I mean? There you go. That might be all the explanation you need. Then again, though, I saw where that kid, Shirley, who went around and did the reports, he previously did the most ridiculous kind of sock puppet Potemkin tour type YouTube video for the Israelis and justifying the war in Gaza. And, you know, he fits a stereotype to me. You know what I mean? I shouldn't assume too much about him. But then somebody came and brought this up in my mentions today, asking me whether I got paid to retweet that thing. And said that, well, Clint Russell said someone offered to pay him to retweet it. And then Clinton, he's a friend of mine, Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown, he showed up in the comments and said that, yeah, after he had already retweeted it anyway, someone came and offered to pay him. And then there's a video of him explaining, but I didn't have time to watch the video. So I don't know like exactly the explanation there, but it seemed to me like we have here. Oh, I have it here, don't I? Watch this. And I know that you already know about this. Let's see if I can get this tab good and shared. This is Ryan Grimm at Drop Site News here. And this came out. Oh man, don't do that to me. This came out a few weeks ago. Israel considered a genocidal apartheid country abroad, according to Israel's own research. Mark Penn, that is one of Hillary Clinton's guys, did some public relations work for them. And so we come down here, we have, everybody thinks that they're murderers and overwhelmingly kill civilians. But here's the punchline. Israel's best tactic to combat this, according to the study, is to foment fear of radical Islam and jihadism, which remains high, the research finds, by highlighting Israeli support for women's rights and gay rights, while elevating concerns that Hamas wants to destroy, quote, destroy all Jews and spread jihadism, end quote. Israeli support rebounded by an average of over 20 points in each country. Quote, especially once the situation in Gaza is resolved, the room for growth in all countries is very significant. So, and it makes sense on the face of it, right? That once the headlines are out of the news about the current chaos, and that's Drop Site News again, Ryan Grimm. Once the worst of the slaughter is out of the news and starts, fading from attention, then they're relying on the fact that they can demonize Muslims as a bunch of foreign language speaking, brown-skinned, faces covered, suicide bomber, jihadi terrorist, Muslim infiltrator guys. And the Israelis are, basically from New York and New Jersey, right? Like a lot of them are half Americans anyway. Like clearly there are guys, and the other guys, you picture a Muslim in a ninja costume with a bomb in his hand or whatever, the eternal enemy over there. You're not on their side, are you? Compared to Israel, which is somehow a state in our union or something like that. And then that's it. And then, it's funny to me because I don't know if you remember it this way, but the way I remember it was once Trump got in there and he made his big deal, why won't they say radical Islam and all that crap when he was running for president in 2016? Remember that? Then once he got in there and they made it all about Russiagate, and then they made it all about COVID and all of that, Ukraine gate, and then COVID. Everybody totally forgot about the bin Ladenites. Even during Obama times when he's supporting the bin Ladenites in Libya and Syria, they're still talking a game about, there are terrible terrorists out there somewhere and we still need the police state to protect you from them and everything. But I seem to remember that they went like 6 or 8 years without even mentioning the bin Ladenites at all. You'd have heard a lot more complaints about it from me than from actually like pro-war types, from my paranoia about them coming to these shores or inspiring people on these shores to commit lone wolf attacks and all that, which we have had. And now all of a sudden, again, the same boomers who fell for Iraq and are supposed to be cured of it now and are into this Iran stuff, all of a sudden they want to hear about radical Islam again. Oh yeah, the Muslims are just conquering the whole country. They're taking over our whole society. And then, you know what? Like right when this came out, Ben Shapiro's guy, Matt Walsh, has his whole thing about the call to prayer in Dearborn, which I ain't for that. There's problems with all this mass immigration. I don't know. But the question is, how much emphasis is put on these stories and by who and with what kind of public relations behind them. And we see those stories about Dearborn. And then now we see this expose of the fraud in Minnesota, as Ryan Dawson pointed out on his blog. This Minnesota thing has been publicly known since 2014. Now, maybe it wasn't the viral story that it became until Elon Musk retweeted it. And I'm not saying anybody put Elon Musk up to retweeting it or anything like that, but just that kid Shirley, he's at least a little bit suspicious, and it would seem to go along with the idea that now is time for major anti-Muslim psyops in America to remind people why we need Israel. I just saw a clip, one more tangent. I just saw a clip of a Christian preacher today at a Jewish function and saying America needs Israel to fight our enemies for us over there, or we'd have to fight them ourselves. We need them to protect us from the vanguard of the Islamic conquest of the West, which, of course, everybody who believes this, everyone on the right who believes this also knows that it's the liberal Democrats who brought all of these people here quite deliberately. This is not, there is no caliphate over there other than the ones that we keep building for them. But anyway, say things now, Mr. Historian.
Well, this isn't history. I talk about the more modern contemporary stuff. I don't know anything about the Shirley kid. Is he from Minnesota?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about him. The fact that he likes Israel or whatever, that really doesn't, whatever. There's a lot of people who are vaguely conservative who like Israel and aren't, necessarily part of an op or something. It's possible. That these two things, like, it's at least that it's being promoted for reasons that have to do with that. But I don't know. I try to be a little bit more judicious about, like, when it comes to like our Middle East policy. Yeah, I'm 100% that guy. Israel runs our country. We're a completely Zionist occupied government, 100% down the line. When we're talking about U.S. Middle Eastern policy, I try to avoid, like, unless there's a real reason to do it, like ascribing everything that happens to Israel, like I feel like they it just seems like it's
narrower than everything. If you go back to the whole thing about we got to pass all these state laws to prevent Sharia law, that thing was run by a guy named Rabbi Yerushalmi from Brooklyn.
Yeah, no doubt that happened.
He was trying to protect the people of Utah and Colorado and Texas from Sharia law. No, he wasn't. He was trying to make you hate and fear Muslims because he thinks you're a piece of shit, and he's trying to control your mind and make you hate Israel's enemies so you'll help him and his friends kill people and steal property from them. That's what that whole thing was about. Give me a fucking break. Yerushalmi. I've never met anyone named Yerushalmi where I'm from.
Yeah, that's true. All that's true. It just doesn't necessarily mean that, like, the next case that comes up, that's critical of a Muslim immigrant community or something is a part of that. It could be, and it's something, I guess, to be aware of. But I don't know. I guess I try to look at that case on its own merits. It's pretty, like, it's pretty. Yeah, it's been around for a long time, that story, like, but it hasn't been quantified, and it hasn't really been, like, reported out and pursued. And it still hasn't, obviously, like this YouTuber going and this YouTuber going and knocking on some doors and demanding to go into the daycare and take film of the children in there, and them saying no is not as big of a story, actually, like, by itself. But, the thing is, like, no doubt, I'm sure there's a huge amount of that kind of fraud going on. Why? Because it's possible. And if it's possible, then people are going to do it. And when you have, like, a very, like, cloistered and closed immigrant community like that doesn't talk to outsiders and looks after their own and has, like, family networks of people that they know they can trust. You run into a lot of that kind of stuff. You go back 100 years ago, it was the local Democratic parties in the big cities. They ran the big cities in league with Jewish and Italian mobsters, the most recent immigrants at the time. And that alliance between state and local Democratic officials and immigrant organized crime it's an old American tradition. It goes back Tammany Hall, and so I think, the real story, there's a couple things about it. Like, one, anybody who's surprised that this kind of thing would happen in a community like that, it doesn't live around communities like that. There's you see down, like, if you go down and live in, like, Orange County or different parts of LA where there's a lot of Arabs, every once in a while you'll go to, like, a Walmart and you'll see 2 or 3 women who are all buying just like nothing but like cases of Pepsi and Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper with their EBT cards and loading them into their expensive SUV and driving to the convenience store that all 3 of their husband, one guy, owns, and stocking the shelves with stuff they bought with their EBT cards. Like that kind of stuff just goes on. It's like it's something that happens, you know? And it like it's not surprising at all that this is going on in Minnesota, but I mean it's this one is particularly interesting.
Somebody wants to pay Clint though to retweet it. That's what bothers me.
Yeah, did
and
he
I
say
need to
who?
look more into it.
Because Clint, if you get this, dude, you gotta name names, man. Like if you something like
he
that.
may have. He may have. It's my fault. I didn't watch the video, but the lady, you know, a stranger in my mentions says he explains in this video, but I didn't have time to watch it before our show tonight. But somebody,
man, I've never had anybody offer to pay me for anything.
Yeah,
guess I'm not cool enough.
Yeah, especially for something that you already tweeted, you know. And, you know, when I retweeted, I quote tweeted it and said, yeah, it's really offensive when freeloaders like Somalis and Israelis steal from us in this way. So if they were trying to manipulate me, I got them and neutralized them back. Huh?
You know, there is definitely a thing where, you know, Israel is like this proxy, like this outlet for American conservatives who aren't allowed to be really nationalists. They're not really allowed to be racist. They're not really allowed to like. Israel is like this outlet where they can be all of those things. They can get it all out of their system on a totally safe target where you hate the Palestinians. I want them all dead, you know, kill them all, kill their children, bathe in their blood. And it's fine. You know, it's totally fine. Like you're not going to get, you know, you're not going to have anything happen to you, you know, that if you said it about literally any other group of people, then, you know, you'd have a problem. I mean, it reminds me of when, remember when the Ukraine war kicked off and Facebook changed its rules, its terms of service to allow calling for the death of Russians only, specifically because you're not allowed to
praising Azov Nazis.
Yeah. And like you know, and so there's definitely some of that, like, you know, it's the safe outlet, you know, it's just and a lot of the anti-Muslim stuff that gets pushed around, the paranoia and whatnot, no question is, you know, it is an Israeli PR tactic. I mean, it's, you know, it is tough though, because like you gotta, you know, you have to be able to kind of separate those two things and recognize that, you know, this isn't something that the Israelis are making up. It's something that they're playing off of and amplifying that is real.
Yeah, exactly.
And is a real problem.
Well, that's what I meant. Yeah, as I said, yeah, this has been a thing for a very long time, but now there seems to be a big push. And it would make sense, even if the kid Shirley wasn't put up to it anyway, it would just make sense that, like, why would Fox News like this story so much? What, you know what I mean? Serves their interests. Make people afraid of people who they have power on this level, but ultimately are nothing compared to, say, for example, the Israel lobby pushing us into another war or something like that. Now, I think this is important here. I'm sure you may have seen this on CNBC. This guy's name is, oh, I'm sorry, I had it a minute ago. It was, it says it right here. Shlomo Kramer, an Israeli billionaire, comes and he says specifically, he doesn't just say, oh, you know, your speech, this, that. He names our First Amendment for elimination.
Networks. Shlomo Kramer, also one of the founders of Checkpoint, another big cyber company. Shlomo, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
How is AI, cyber warfare, shaping geopolitics right now?
So AI is going to revolutionize cyber warfare, is revolutionizing cyber warfare from critical infrastructure to the fabric of society and politics, and undermining it, giving unfair advantage to authoritarian governments against democratic countries. First Amendment type of...
That's already happening?
That's already happening. You're seeing the polarization in countries that allow for the First Amendment and protect it, which is great. And I know it's difficult to hear, but it's time to limit the First Amendment in order to protect it. And quickly before it's too late.
What do you mean?
I mean that we need to control the platforms. all the social platforms. We need to stack rank the authenticity of every person that expresses themselves online and take control over what they are saying based on that ranking.
The government should control the social media.
Should do that. And we need to educate people again.
So there you go, dude. Anti-Zionism is cyber war. And so no one should be allowed to go on the internet without scanning their eyeball and verifying their ID somehow. And then you should be able to say whatever you want unless this guy doesn't like it, in which case the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which says, okay, government, we'll let you exist under the following declaratory and restrictive clauses to prevent misconstruction or abuse of your powers. That, yeah, for one thing, Congress has no authority whatsoever to pass a law curtailing the freedom of speech, any more than they can tell you what church you can go to or not. Daryl Cooper. So, speaking of black pills, I guess that is where we are. All right, now we're up on the end of the show here. I wanted to talk about the Saudi-backed jihadis fighting the UAE-backed jihadis. No, fighting the UAE-backed ex-commies of the Southern Transitional Council there in Yemen. But we ain't got time for that madness. But it's up at antiwar.com right now. And please keep your eyes, everybody, on the plight of the poor Palestinians. Suffering in their camps in the rain and in the cold and in their, little kids dying and people living in bombed out shit. It's horrible. Anyway, so now is the part of the show brought to you by the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom. Sign up for the Scott Horton Academy and you will learn a bunch of stuff. My new Cold War course is up there. You learn the reality of the Israel-Palestine conflict from the great Ramsey Baroud and Debunking Christian Zionism with Adam Francisco. It's ScottHortonAcademy.com. And it's the comments brought to you by the Scott Horton Academy. So let's see if we can go through some of these comments here. Let me blab about this while I page through comments. Boy, we got a lot to page through here. Let me blab about this, Mr. Cooper. You know what I'd done seen today on the tubes was Ian Carroll interviewed on the Tucker Carlson show. Did you see that? You know what I'm talking about?
I saw that it exists.
It does exist. So here's what it's about. It's about Las Vegas, October 2017, and the horrible massacre that took place there and the cover-up. And, I had a bad impression of that guy at first because, the first thing I ever heard him say was some kind of half-baked stuff about Israel-Palestine, and I was like, phooey. But I have a new appreciation for him in watching this interview. He was very careful about most of what he said as far as no, we don't really know this, but it looks like maybe this matters. And here's something that jumped out at me. And he seemed very fair in the way he did it. When he was speculating, he said he was speculating and all that. It was less truth or kooky and more just, I'm interested in this cover up, which I like that kind of stuff. You know me, I'm an Oklahoma bombing kook till the end. It was a bunch of FBI informant neo-Nazis that did it, if you're curious. Anyway, so Carroll says he's compiling this information from a lot of other researchers. And I had seen this video by this lady, Mindy something, a couple of years ago, where she definitely proved that there was gunfire going on all down the strip at these different locations, up the strip, I guess, for more than an hour after the whole thing was supposedly over. And there were all kinds of other anomalies, such as the first body cam footage shows no shell casings, no broken glass, no broken window in the main room of his. And which I remember seeing that myself. And there were some things, and I wanted to interview this lady, Mindy something, but I never got around to it because I'm always working on a book or some kind of damn thing. And so I never did it. And, but what he's talking about is right along the same lines of what she was saying about there are definitely multiple shooters involved. It's very questionable the role that this guy Paddock had at all. There are, I believe, legitimate questions about whether there was fire from helicopters. He goes on this kind of theory.
To what end? What's the speculation about why?
Well, that's the thing. So he says, so he goes, well, who would possibly commit such a ruthless act against Americans. And then he deduces, and others have too, that he's borrowing from, that it would have been pro bin Ladenites. And maybe if not like, you know, scumbag box cutter bin Ladenites, but like helicopter pilot bin Ladenites, you know what I mean, at the top of Saudi society, that they would have done it, and that this would have been part of the faction fight with Mohammed bin Salman taking over the country and arresting Mohammed bin Nayef, the crown prince, and replacing him, and arresting bin Talal and all of these different guys, and consolidating his power really for the more modernists against the more reactionary kind of King Fahd era bin Ladenite simp types, which I still don't think that's right, man. I think when you're talking about the real elite levels of Saudi Arabia running the bin Ladenites, I think that's much more business and cooperation with America and Britain in doing stuff like that, rather than like true ideological commitment inside the leadership of their intelligence services and stuff. I could be wrong about that, but I don't really like his answer. But he doesn't either. Like he admitted it was speculation enough, but it was kind of starting from, but like, who is going to really unload into a crowd of Americans like that? You would have to, that's the kind of thing a bin Ladenite would do. It's kind of hard to figure who else would.
I can't think of any examples where they don't take credit for their acts, though.
That's
I don't know.
true.
Like,
yeah. Well, and he made it sound like, you know, it was like a year later that MBS murdered Khashoggi, and he made it sound like he thought that Khashoggi was in on it with the bin Ladenite side, which Khashoggi did support the bin Ladenites in Syria. I know that. But, and it was when bin Salman came to power is when Saudi started backing down on Syria, in 2014, 15. So, but then of course, I got a real prejudice against MBS though, because of the Yemen war. But then whatever, that's beside the point of like this, in the scheme of things, there was this massive fight inside the royal family. And Ian seemed to think that that had something to do with what happened in Vegas. I don't really get that part of it, but I don't know what was going on, but I think it's absolutely clear that there were multiple shooters and multiple scenes all over the place. But you know, even I think he pointed out that like here you have this massacre, and then you have all these reports of gunfire up the strip, but you don't have a lot of innocent people killed up the strip. It doesn't seem like you have just some lady murdered in cold blood at the Bellagio, but we do have lots of reports of gunshots there from all different people calling in. So it's anyway, I don't know. It's really something, man.
The excuse, right, is that, you know, in a place like the strip with all those tall buildings, just that those gunshots just echo up and down, right? I mean,
no. This is like multiple employees, security guards, people calling their gunshots at this floor. And this is way after Paddock supposedly already dead. The gunfire from the hotel has stopped. Whatever's going on at that part of strip is over. And I've heard these 911 calls. They have the timestamps on them where, and this is the part, I didn't do any damn research at all. I watched Mindy Something's documentary is what I did. And she shows that this was going on for like an hour or something after. And he references all kinds of people who seemingly were shot from ground level, were shot when they were behind a concrete barricade on the other side of the hotel or from the hotel where they were, you know, and then got shot anyway. There's really some suspicious stuff there. And I really don't like kook stuff because I used to be much more of a conspiracy guy. And that's when I was stupid and young and wrong about things. And I don't like being wrong about stuff very much. So I have a real allergy to this kind of thing, but I do think they're lying their asses off about what all happened there. And I think there is a massive cover up.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, you know, when for sure, like there's a ton of stuff that never made sense about the Vegas shooting. No question about it, especially just given their caginess about the whole thing from the beginning, you know? But you know, if somebody has a theory about it, like I'll watch the interview with Ian. If somebody has a theory, the first thing I want to know is like who benefited and how from it.
Yeah,
you know, and
I don't think anybody
who, like the old Alex Jones idea of like false flag shootings in Sandy Hook or whatever, is they want to take our guns, and it's like, okay, but they never did. Yeah. So, you know, I don't.
But they never had a motive for. There's no official even claimed motive for even the official story of why
he
this
was a weird guy, right? He was like a private pilot who would fly out of the country a lot. He was a millionaire who supposedly made all his money from playing video poker or some idiotic, nonsense like that, independently wealthy, but nobody knows how. He didn't work for anybody, and nobody really knew who he was. They didn't have any like close associates that could be interviewed. Just this like non-person kind of guy with millions of dollars and a private pilot license.
Carol thought he was just a patsy. Carol thought he got lured there under the idea that he was going to sell some guns. He was a gun guy who had a lot of guns, and that he was maybe lured there on the idea that he was going to do some business. And then all this stuff happened.
But because what didn't he have like in his room? There were like 50 guns or something, right? And it's like, why would you even?
And, like, and as you said, almost all of them are ARs, semi-automatics. And this whole thing about the bump stocks and all that, a bump stock does not a full auto M16 make. You know what I mean? And it's just, and even those are like mostly on 3-shot bursts, not just, If
you're going to do something like that, like maybe bring a backup gun in case something goes wrong. But like basically have one gun and a ton of magazines. Like, why would you it's not like you're going to make your escape with your 50 gun cases or something. Right. That's very strange. So I don't know. Yeah. If you find that video by Mindy, what's her name, put it on Twitter or something so everybody can see it, and I'll watch that. I've never seen much about like the gunshots going up and down the strip or anything like that.
Yeah. And he referenced her too. And he also referenced something that was called, I Googled it. It was like Vegas. Let me see if it'll just come up if I type it here, buddy. It's Vegas map. VegasShootingMap.com. All one word, okay? VegasShootingMap.com, and some anonymous person, he said, made it. Doesn't take credit for it. And then it has pins in it. And you can listen to all the 911 calls. You can see where people were shot and when, and all this huge, just tons of information there. The helicopter stuff. And, I had seen there was some weird things about the helicopters and there's a bit of speculation there, but it's worth looking at, man. It's one of those where, I wouldn't begin to speculate about what the hell was going on there, but I do think that there's enough to really doubt that this one kook did this. And by the way, for no reason at all. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely, hell, again, I've seen that body cam footage when they first go in there and the windows aren't broken. And Carol says that in the joining room, he thinks that the window was broken there. And I do believe I've seen pictures from outside that show at least one window was broken there. But it ain't the way they said. And then they have pictures of broken glass and shell casings. But when you look at the body cam, there's no broken glass and shell casings, And that's where they say the pictures are from. It's from like right here. And according to Carol, I don't know this, but according to him, the bloodstains look like they're two different bloodstains, one much older than the other, kind of overlapping and this kind of thing. A bit suspicious in some of those pictures. I don't know, man.
Yeah. The one thing I do try to keep in mind is that we are in an age now where every so often, a kid gets his parents' gun and walks into his school and shoots up the cafeteria, like that is the world we live in now. And so there's people out there like that who just, they tip over and, and fall off the edge and they end up doing something like that. And so, that is always a possibility. Like the fact that there's no motive and all that. It's definitely makes it worth questioning.
Yeah.
But, it's also worth keeping in mind that, this stuff does happen,
Yeah. Look, I knew a kid, if you remember the kid that did the Parkland shooting in Florida, I knew a kid that was just like that, man. And I remember him he had a Tech 9 and joking and talking about how, man, it'd be so funny, like go to a mall and just like start shooting people and watch them all screaming and running. Like he's like a 16 or 19-year-old kid, just like, yeah, that'd be great, dude. Check out my new Snoop Dogg shirt. And he's just like an idiot kid, dude. And I remember going, come on, man, like you don't really mean that. Like you'd really be hurting people and destroying people's families and destroying lives. And like, I'm a stupid kid and I'm a psycho too, but I ain't that crazy, And then he's looking at me like, what? Like, no, it would be funny, dude. Can't you picture him screaming and running? That's funny. And this same kid ended up getting waxed by, I think he probably had it coming, by the Williamson County Sheriffs. They gunned him down he came out shooting not much later after that. But he very well could have done a mass shooting like that because yeah, dude, that would be rad. You know what I mean? Like that was the extent of his thought on it. You know what I mean? Just like low IQ kind of watch too much TV kind of crap, This guy says, Scott King says, the new Seymour Hersh doc on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it. It is good. And all of a sudden I just blanked on the name of it, but it is really great. It's called Cover Up. It starts out, of course, with his coverage of the My massacre and all this stuff. I would hasten to point people to the great Aaron Matei and Max Blumenthal. They have a new video where they debunk the lie, sort of by edit, the implication in the movie that Hersh is retracting his 2013 Ghouta sarin attack story when he retracted no such thing at all. They edited that, it's pretty obviously weirdly edited, where he's saying essentially, geez, I didn't know Assad could be that brutal. I knew he was bad, but I didn't know he was that bad. And then they make it seem like he's saying that's the only reason that he thought that Assad didn't do the sarin attack was because, geez, I just couldn't believe that about him. But that's not what the story said, dude. And that's clearly not what he's saying in that part of the documentary. So it's a very good documentary, except for that part. And shame on Laura Poitras for that crap. But I guess that's what you have to be a liberal.
Cy Hersh, also the guy who outed Robert Maxwell and his editor at the Daily Mail for being Mossad agents. And probably, I mean, like possibility at least that, that his breaking of that story led to Maxwell getting killed. Maxwell was,
oh, that's interesting. That's what led to him getting killed.
I think, look, I mean, they were getting to the point where Maxwell was going to get dragged into court and they were going to go through all the books of his pension fund and everything else and find out, where did all this money go? What did you do with it? Who are these shell companies? Why are they in Tel Aviv? And so that but he died and none of that happened because there was no criminal prosecution. And so there was no discovery, forensic financial discovery, stuff like that. And, it just became this sort of scandal of this dead, corrupt guy who stole a bunch of money. And that was that,
Yeah. So this guy says I'm wrong about Israel had air dominance over Iran. They just had this narrow corridor and fired standoff missiles. But I guess my understanding was the first thing that they'd done was take out virtually all of the SM-3s or certainly over anywhere that they were flying. And although obviously the American subs and ships helped with Tomahawks, and then they brought in the B-2s. So I don't know if you call it total air dominance, but I don't remember a single Israeli plane getting shot down after bombing the crap out of the place for 2 weeks. So,
we don't need air.
I'm not sure how much I may have overstated that, quite frankly.
We don't need air dominance to get our B-2s anywhere, but it's possible. I honestly haven't studied like the 12-day war and like that level of detail where the Israeli planes were and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, this guy's setting a very good example for everybody else here with his wonderful donation to our great show here. And so I don't know, man. I think we're almost done here and we're already way over time. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your podcast and when people can expect the next episode there, Mr. Cooper?
I don't know. I'm working on it. It's tough, dude, if you can tell, like my brain is totally fried right now and I'm not really up on a lot of the stuff that's been on the news because basically for the last week and a half, I've been completely buried in very detailed, like academic essays on migration patterns in Central Eastern Europe in the aftermath of World War I. And so it's kind of, when that's like all you've been doing for like a week and a half, and then you got to come and talk about current events. That's why I'm a little out of sorts. So I, look, every time I'm reading that, I'm going through like a stack of books right now that I have to read to be able to put together a section in the middle of this episode and make it work. And I'm going through whole books that are absolutely necessary for me to read because I need to know the information so I don't say something stupid, something that's wrong about, but I'll go through and read like 5 books for a part of the podcast that realistically is going to be like 5 minutes long, but I have to read the stuff because I have to know it if I'm going to say it, and so it takes a ton of time, man. Like all I've been doing is reading books. Yeah. And as far as when it's going to be done, I mean, the thing is, I don't have a process where it's like, by this date, I'm going to be 12% done. And by that date, 28% done. It just doesn't work like that. Like I read through all my books. I write probably 10 pages for every page worth of material that makes it into the podcast itself. And then after a certain point, I start to lose my mind and get desperate enough that I just sit myself down and write it out and force myself to just, to put it out. But I don't know. I would say I probably have at least another month of just, I got to get through this stack of books that's on my side table. So,
man, I have lived in that hell. I know. And you even just right here off screen, my pile of books, man, it's not funny. But yeah, I don't like being an author. It's terrible. And what you're doing is the same thing, really. Then you just do a big audiobook, which is even worse than writing a book, doing an audiobook. So you're a real hero, man. I really can't wait till the next section of this, till all the great sections.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you, it is going to be really good. Like I've learned so much about the post World War I period in Central and Eastern Europe. And like I'm at the part in the development of the episode where this part is consistent, like how this works. I'm at the part right now where like in my head, I completely understand how all of these things that happened in the immediate aftermath of World War I led to, the real subject of the podcast, which is the rise of the National Socialists in World War II. In my head, it's like 100% clear. If you ask me to explain it to you right now, I'd start stuttering and stuff. Like it's not that put together in that way. And so eventually it will be. Like eventually it'll hit a point where it'll kind of crystallize and I'll be able to sit down and map it all out and describe it to you in a podcast. And
I can't wait.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yep. All right. This guy asked about the new Cold War with China. I would recommend my colleague at the Libertarian Institute, Joe Solis Mullen, wrote a great book called The Fake China Threat and Its Very Real Danger. Unlike Osama bin Laden's Islamo-fascist caliphate, hey, China actually exists and has H-bombs and ICBMs. Thanks, Bill Clinton. And so, we might want to consider how we treat that rising.
I've actually never read any books about like contemporary or recent U.S.-China relations, but if you want one that does describe kind of the longer term history, which is still interesting because it informs a lot, obviously, of what's going on now. There's one called "The Beautiful Country in the Middle Kingdom," and it's the history of America-Chinese relations. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, this guy says I'm a drama queen, but I'm reading it out of time, so I'm not sure what that's a reference to. Was I getting upset?
He's a drama king, biatch.
Yeah, man. Hey, check it out, dude. I got a new Poison Idea record today. Chaos and Conquest. No, Confuse and Conquer. Sorry, I'm blind. I think it's their last album, 2015. So Pig was dead by then, so yeah. All right. Let's call it a night. Good night.